Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tech Champions. I'm your host, Daniel Beaty, CTO with AuditMax in Jacksonville, Florida. As you know, we take time each week to sit down with thought leaders and industry experts in the field of technology. We love to learn about their journey and their mission and get their perspective on the latest trends in the industry. We always have amazing guests on the show. Today is no exception. Joining us from Juniper, Florida is Jeff Bray. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome. Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Glad to have you. What do you think of this cold snap we've had in Florida?
Well, I'm not a true Floridian. Yeah, I'm not a true Floridian, so I can obviously say I've enjoyed it.
It was okay with you?
Okay with me.
Right. Yeah, I looked at the weather this week. I think our low yesterday was lower than New York City, I think, this week. So it was kind of crazy. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun. So, Jeff, you are currently the EVP of Technology and Operations at Seacoast Bank, but I know you've held a number of positions across your career, places like Bank of America, Capital One, GE, and you're also a black belt, and I'll let you tell us what kind of black belt you are. But tell us a little bit about your background and your kind of personal journey to this point.
Sure. I think relatively interesting in terms of diversity, both large and small companies to this point. I would say it's probably marked by four pillars in terms of what has happened to me in my career. Probably the first with GE, which when I joined back in GE in the late 90s, that was still when Jack Welch was running the company and still very much in the throes of rolling out Six Sigma across the organization. And that's essentially what, tapped me early on and got me really engaged in the organization was Six Sigma process improvement and seeing that value at a company and enterprise level. And then a lot of us that started off at GE ended up expanding out into financial services, which is kind of the first stop with Capital One and then Bank of America, all with the thread around Six Sigma. And over that time, got green belt certified, got black belt certified, got master black belt certified. But Bank of America kind of added the second pillar, which was really around M&A, and spent a good portion of my career at Bank of America, working on some of the major transactions, with Fleet Boston, U.S. Trust, MBNA, Countrywide, tail end of Merrill Lynch. And so I really got a fundamental look into how M&A is done, especially at a large corporation, the complexity that comes with it, and obviously the technology complexity that gets presented when you're merging two large organizations. And when you think about the application stack, the infrastructure that gets presented, ends up being a sizable challenge for any organization to walk through. As you look at trying to simplify, take complexity, take the best of both breeds. Then I moved on from Bank of America, went to a company called DFC Global, and had the opportunity to spend a lot of my time taking a predominantly retail organization into learning what the digital channel could drive from a lending perspective. And did that overseas with my family, who was headquartered, was living in London at the time, and really, the hyper growth around how technology can be leveraged to drive hyper growth. I think when I got there, we were probably 30 million in revenue, maybe 11 million in EBITDA. And over a 5-year period, we grew the business to driving about 400 million in revenue and about 135 million in EBITDA.
Oh, wow.
And then we sold the company to a private equity firm, and took a little bit of time off, and then landed at Seacoast Bank that, by and large, had similar aspirations around really, how to leverage technology to drive a heck of a lot of efficiency within the bank. And that's what attracted me to Seacoast Bank was, the opportunity. They're not at a size where you have a lot of anchor points that you worry about at regional or large banks. Not necessarily a tremendous amount of technical debt. and so there was a pretty good opportunity to come in and create some value for Seacoast Bank. And by and large, I would say, collectively, I think with any leader, as they reflect over their careers, it's marked by, coming across solid, individuals, solid teams, and the learning that I've acquired over the last 20 years has just been such a blessing with working with really good leaders, really good individuals, really good performing teams.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. I love that. You've had a rich history, and I especially can appreciate the M&A piece, and that really is a whole separate animal than your standard organic growth. So it sounds like you've had a lot of experience with that. That's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about 2020. It's obviously been a crazy year with the pandemic and people working from home and restrictions and things like that. Do you have any advice for companies that are trying to not just survive but thrive in this current economy?
Well, I think companies that stand out, from my perspective, are voracious learners. I think that's a thread that any good company, any good team, that is how good are they in learning and adjusting. And I think that's what's probably tested every company that's walked through the last 11 months. When you think about what has transpired, is the challenge with a lot of change coming at a significant, fast pace, um, environment, and not a lot of, you, I guess, experience with going through that amount of change in such a short period of time. And I think learning organizations, and organizations that tend to do a lot of test and learns, organizations that tend to test their way into the next product, the next revenue opportunity, the next business opportunity, I think tend to have a leg up, mainly because they realize that it's a continuous learning event. And I would say that that's what has probably defined us here at Seacoast Bank, is the ability for us to learn and adjust and learn and adjust and learn and adjust as we've walked the road the last 11 months, and the willingness to take some risk, which also presents some challenges when you think about doing this in an environment where you've got a lot of uncertainty, especially in terms of employee health, and population health.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I think there's some great insights there for sure. So the learning, I think, also puts you in that proactive state as opposed to reactive state. I think the companies that have struggled have been just trying to keep up, and the ones that are thriving are the ones that are, like you said, are learning and adjusting. So I think that's a great answer. We'll switch gears just for a minute. Something else I know you're really passionate about is RPA, robotic process automation, and its effect on business. So, but for our audience, can you give them your best definition for robotic process automation and talk about what it means to businesses today?
Yeah, so that's complicated. I think you could probably define RPA in any sort of manners, but I think basically it's using software to replicate processes that humans do on a day-to-day perspective. And it's really the software, or technology and software, emulating what and the integration of those actions that might an employee or a human do on a routine, on a work task. And so what you're doing is you're looking at RPA being a tool that companies can employ that can solve some challenges when you think about how often a task is done, how frequently a task is done, the complexity of that task, and when you think about companies that are growing and scaling, I think Seacoast Bank, we've grown quickly over the last few years. It's given us opportunities to solve problems that allow us to continue to look at ways to be efficient in how we run the bank and how we have acquired a bank. So I think that's probably the most interesting notion for us is we got involved in RPA to help us on M&A acquisitions.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And so how does RPA differ from some of the other acronyms and buzzwords we're hearing now, artificial intelligence, machine learning? What are some of the primary differences there?
I think they're part of the broader ecosystem, right? When you start thinking around, how computers can provide value in terms of acquiring data, automating or digitizing tasks, to looking for insights, looking for threads, looking for value in those, the data that it gets collected. So I think it's when you look at artificial intelligence, machine learning, you're getting into, I think, the next evolution of how computers, technology can add value for a business, and that gets into harnessing information, helping to evaluate the information, looking for ways to employ your RPA more efficiently in your business processes.
Okay. That's great. Hey, can you give us an example or two of RPA, like real world examples?
Yeah, real. So I think from my perspective, here's a couple that have played out for us. We use RPA on the M&A side, and we use that in a way to give us flexibility to how we migrate information out of the acquired bank onto our core platform. And we've used this in the last, I think, 8 M&A acquisitions that we've done, and that's given us flexibility to really do across 3 spectrums. One is the speed of the integration, so it allows us a little bit more control of the timeline of the integration. Whereas if you're using your traditional core provider to help you with that, you can have challenges in terms of their availability to support you. So I think it's given us flexibility from a time to execute the M&A conversion process. I think number 2, it's given us better line of sight into understanding data quality and the quality of the data that we're importing over, because it's allowed us to run through mock conversions a lot more efficiently, and really helping us look at ways to improve how we bring the data over into our environment. And then I think the third element from that is it's given us an ability to be efficient in terms of how we map the data from one core into another core. It's given us the ability to leverage the history. So when you think about setting up these routines in the RPA system, we've been able to bring on and reuse those routines with some minor modifications on each transaction, so that the speed in terms of how you get your arms around the data conversion, I think, has been another advantage from that perspective. On the flip side, living in Florida, and I'm not a Floridian, but being presented with these tropical weather systems called hurricanes, presents another challenge, which is speed and speed of execution. And we've leveraged RPA in that realm a couple of times when we've had to really look at how quickly we can change information or thresholds that we typically use to govern the business, and raising those thresholds to enable customers more access to their funds in a shorter amount of time. And that's where the RPA has played it to our advantages, having the ability to use those routines to help with, for example, raising debit card limits automatically across the debit card holder base. Is that you want the availability, and you don't have a lot of time when you think about what's transpired over the last few years with how quickly storms speed up and how quickly they strengthen. So we've leveraged RPA to kind of help us on our business continuity processes that allow us to hopefully give back some time, free up some time, not only for our own employees but for customers in terms of gaining access and preparing for the storm, and their preparations on how they're preparing their businesses and their families from a safety and security perspective.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the education on RPA, and it sounds like there are a lot of efficiencies and speed enhancements that come along with that as well. So, unfortunately, we do need to wrap up soon, but I want to ask one final question we love to ask of all of our guests, and that is, what's one characteristic you think it takes to become a tech champion?
We don't have 5 hours, right? Because there's a lot of dimensions. I think in today's, in today's world, you're in a profession that has to continually learn, because the innovation and the cycle of innovation that comes through the technology paradigm is at a pace that I think can cause challenges. So you have to spend a lot of not only work time but personal time to really learn with what's going out and going out in the environment, what's happening from a technology standpoint across all the functional dimensions. And so I think you have to be a voracious learner, that ties to the thread of my first comment earlier on in our conversation, which is really, really important, because just the speed of change that we are seeing in the technology vertical, just is attributed to not only to how that those verticals drawing the brightest and the best, but also the challenges that it can present in terms of making good decisions, the right decisions strategically for companies around where to place their bets on what technology they need to have in their ecosystem to continue to drive value for their shareholders and for their customers.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Okay. Well, Jeff Bray, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Seacoast Bank. So, if people want to reach you, is LinkedIn the best way, or how could they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. We can also, Daniel, if we need to, we can share my work email as well as part of the cast.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine too. So thank you, Jeff, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. And to our audience, thank you for joining. I'm your host, Daniel Beaty. We'll see you next time on Tech Champions.